Hello, students, and a very warm welcome to your history class. We are on the second lesson of your history textbook, that is India before the times of Shivaji Maharaj. It is very interesting, my dear children, to know about what had happened in those times. So, basically, right now, we are going to be starting with our lesson beginning from the Bahmani kingdom. So get your book and a pencil pen to make some notes, and again keep your mind open. If there are any questions that comes to your mind, make a note of it, because a questioning mind will help a person explore a lot, and that is something which will develop a person, because he has an open mind, and the person is curious to know what is happening. So let us begin with our lesson, and now we are going to focus on the Bahmani kingdom. So just to give you a little bit of background, we are currently looking at Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Um, he was the Sultan of Delhi, and I'm referring to a period in the year 1325 to 1351. And he was the founder of the Tughlaq dynasty. Muhammad bin Tughlaq was born in New Delhi. His wife was the daughter of the Raja of Deepalpur, and he Muhammad Tughlaq was defeated by, as per your textbook, by the person named Hassan Gangu. Now, let me give you some information. See, I need to give you a little background information. Hassan Gangu, he actually Alauddin Bahman Shah. See, Bahman Shah, get that name, Alauddin Hassan Bahman Shah. So, and actually, the original name was Zafar Khan, and he was the founder of the Bahmani Sultanate. So, Zafar Khan was actually a noble employee of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and he was a servant of a Brahmin astrologer named Gangadhar Shastri Babale of Delhi, and he himself was called Hassan Gangu. So historians may not get the correlation between the two names. So Hassan Gangu is actually Alauddin Bahman Shah, and he was the one who defeated Muhammad Tughlaq. And a little bit of the background: the Bahmani kingdom, or the Bahmani Sultanate, was a Persianate. When I say Persianate, it is coming from the Persian society, Persia. So it's a Muslim state of the Deccan in south of India, South India, and one of the major medieval Indian kingdoms. You have ancient, medieval, and modern periods. I'm referring to the medieval period, and this is one of the major medieval kingdoms. And Bahman Sultanate was the first independent Muslim kingdom in South India. All the time we were looking, it was all North India, Delhi, but now we are referring to South India. And later on, yes, this kingdom got split into various offshoots that we will look at later. So let us look at the Bahmani kingdom. So while Muhammad bin Tughlaq was still reigning, some of his sardars in the Deccan, and that is South India, rose in rebellion, means began to fight against their own sultan. So they became a rebel against Muhammad bin Tughlaq. So the leaders of the Sardar, and that is Hassan Gangu, defeated the army of the Sultan of Delhi. When I say Sultan of Delhi, I am referring to Muhammad bin Tughlaq. They went against their Sultan. As a result, a new kingdom known as the Bahmani kingdom came into existence in the year 1347 CE, and Hassan Gangu became the first sultan of the Bahmani kingdom, and he made the city of Gulbarga, which is in Karnataka right now, his capital. Well, a very simple question: who is the Prime Minister of India? Right, Mr. Narendra Modi. Who is the President of the United States of America? Correct, it is Mr. Donald Trump. So you can understand what is the work of a prime minister or what is the work of a president, right? So similarly, we are looking at the next person you're going to be studying about, Mahmud Gawan. Now, Mahmud Gawan is ideally from Iran, and he was a prime minister in the Bahmani Sultanate of Deccan. Um, well, he was a very well versed person, means he is highly intellectual and knowledgeable person. He was very well versed with the Islamic theology. Islamic theology means understanding the knowledge and law understanding the law of the Islam's religion of Quran, and also Persian language. He was very good at it. He was very good at mathematics. Not just that, he was a poet. He also writes like prose that you have in your language textbook, uh, prose writer. And yes, he began to later became minister of many other courts, and he was a storehouse of wisdom, and he enjoyed the trust and confidence of rulers, locals, as well as that of foreign kingdoms who had great respect for Muhammad. So you can say that as a character, if you look at this person, he was very competent, a very successful general, capable administrator, learned man, and he had a lot of he used to patronize art and poetry. So Muhammad Gawan, as I said, like the prime minister, was a chief vizier of the Bahmani kingdom. Therefore, because he was a very good administrator, he strengthened the Bahmani kingdom, and he started paying the soldiers their salaries in cash instead of giving land grants, land, zameen. Instead of giving land, he was paying them in cash, in money, and he ensured that the discipline is there in the army. And there are many kind of land reforms or revenue system. So he introduced many reforms in the land revenue system, and he opened a madrasa. Madrasa is a place where people, children or students come to study. So he opened a madrasa at Bidar for Arabic and Persian studies. Unfortunately, after the death of Muhammad Gawan, factionism increased. When I say factionism, it is referring to partiality, giving favorism to someone else. It is getting disintegrated. So, factionism increased among the Sardars of the Bahmani kingdom, and secondly, all the conflict with the Vijayanagar kingdom had a lot of adverse effect, a lot of negative effect on the Bahmani kingdom. And instead of working unitedly, the provincial governors began to act more independently, like, I am the main person, I am the boss, I am the ruler. So the provincial governors, instead of working together, they began to act more independently. Therefore, you know the story, right? If you are united, you stand together. If you're divided, you fall. So this led to the disintegration of the Bahmani kingdom into five small powers. So from one it has become to five, and that is Imad Shahi of Varhad, and Bharat Shahi of Bidar, Adil Shahi of Bijapur, Nizam Shahi of Ahmednagar, and Qutb Shahi of Golconda. So remember these names, and later on, if you get the time, Google it and find more about these kingdoms. Now I'm going to be focusing a bit on Mughal Empire. Well, Mughal Empire is very interesting, and in a way, I thank the Mughal Empire because not just don't look at the kings something as negative or as bad people. They are, after all, kings, and you get to see the good and the bad side of them. And the best part about the Mughal Empire is that they brought a lot of architecture style to India. Now imagine or Google how many countries are there in the world. How many countries are there in the world? And from those many countries in the world, India is one of them, isn't it? And in the seven wonders of the world, India is one of them. Now, that is because of the Taj Mahal. And Taj Mahal is a Mughal architecture. It is so beautiful. If one gets an opportunity, should never miss this, one of the seven wonders of the world, which is in our very own country. Now, if you cannot go to Agra and see the Taj Mahal, I would say Google and look at the images, but still, it will not give that effect if you happen to see in reality. So yes, Mughal Empire is a vast and a strong kingdom. Now, the Mughal Empire originally is said to be founded by Babur. Babur, is the grandfather of Akbar the Great. Okay, so he was a warrior chieftain from what today is place called Uzbekistan. He's from there, and he took help from his neighboring rulers and came to defeat the Sultan of Delhi. Just a little bit of other information. Now, I told you about the Mughals, right? Now, at that point of time, what is happening in India? So, in the same year, 1523, around that time, Ibrahim Lodi, Daulat Khan's sovereign, was locked in a power struggle with his relatives and minister. Daulat Khan was one of Ibrahim's chief opponents, along with the ruler's own uncle, Alam Khan, also known as Alauddin, who at that time was living under the protection of Sultan Muzaffar of Gujarat. Now, there was a rebellion throughout the empire. Now, aware of his own position, Daulat Khan sent his son Ghazi Khan Lodi to Delhi to learn some more about the states and aware of the government. And when his son came back, Ghazi Khan warned his father that Ibrahim Lodi was planning to remove his governorship. Therefore, in response to this, Daulat Khan sent a message to Babur, and Babur is in Kabul, and asking him that to give some help in exchange for assistance in against the emperor. And Babur saw this as a great opportunity, and he agreed. Uh, what And then after that is history, and Babur became the ruler of India. So let us focus more on Babur now. In 1526 CE, the Sultanate of Delhi came to an end, and then the Mughal power was established. Babur was the founder of the Mughal power. He was the king of Fargana in Central Asia, in today's Uzbekistan. He had heard of the wealth in India, so he planned an invasion of India. At at that time, the reigning Sultan of Delhi at that time was Ibrahim Lodi. Daulat Khan Lodi was the governor of Punjab under the Sultanate. The relationship between Ibrahim Lodi and Daulat Khan Lodi was not that great, was strained. Therefore, as I just previously told you, that how Daulat Khan invited Babur. So Daulat Khan invited Babur to march on India. Taking this opportunity, Babur invaded India. To repel Babur's invasion, Ibrahim Lodi started with his army, and there was a battle between Ibrahim Lodi and Babur on the 21st of April in the year 1526 at Panipat. And in this battle, Babur made use of an artillery, the guns or weapons, effectively for the first time in India, and he defeated Ibrahim Lodi's army. And this is known as the first battle of Panipat. Yes. And after the battle of Panipat, Rana Sanga of Mewad brought all Rajput kings together. There was a battle between Babur and Rana Sanga at Kanua. Again, Babur's artillery and reserve force played a key role in this battle, and unfortunately, Rana Sanga's army was defeated. And yes, you can Google more and you can see the works of Babur. And also, Babur died in the year 1530. After Babur, Humayun took over from 1530 to 1539. So, when Humayun succeeded his father to the throne of Delhi as the ruler of the Mughal territories in the Indian subcontinent, Humayun was an inexperienced ruler when he came to power at the age of 22. And Humayun lost the Mughal territories to Sher Shah Suri. But also to let you know that after 15 years, with the help of Safavid, Humayun's return from Persia was accompanied by a large retinue of Persian noblemen and signaled an important change in Mughal court culture. So there was a shift. That's a whole history altogether. When we get time, we can go in detail. Now, as I said, Humayun was defeated by Sher Shah Suri. Sher Shah Suri was the empire, was the ruler or the founder of the Suri Empire, and he was the one who brought in rupee, your rupee. He was the one who got in rupee into the country. So let us continue. So Sher Shah Suri established the Sur dynasty on the throne of Delhi, and as I told you, Humayun came back, and thereafter we get to know Akbar. After Humayun is Akbar, that is his son. 1556 CE to 1605 CE, he ascended the throne. Then also an important battle was there between him, Akbar, and Hemu. Now, who is Hemu? In the textbook, it is just written Hemu. So, Hemu was actually Hemu Vikramaditya, or you can also call as Hemchandra Vikramaditya. This name is so much better, right, rather than Hemu. So now we will stick to Hemu. Hemu was a Hindu king who previously served as a general and chief minister of Adil Shah Suri of the Sur dynasty. And during a period of Indian history when the Mughals and Afghans were vying for powers across northern India, he fought Afghan rebels across North India from the Punjab to Bengal, and the Mughal forces of Humayun and Akbar in Agra and Delhi, and he won a lot of many battles. Okay, but Hemu claimed royal status after defeating Akbar's Mughal forces in the Battle of Delhi and assumed the ancient title of Vikramaditya that he had been adopted by many Hindu kings in the past. But a month later, Hemu was wounded by a chance arrow and captured unconscious during the second battle of Panipat. So now coming back to the chapter again, Akbar and Hemu at Panipat in 1556. This is the second battle of Panipat, and Akbar won. Okay, and Hemu's head was beheaded, by the way. So Akbar's ambition was to bring the whole of India under his one central authority. And after Akbar, the next king is Jahangir. He became the emperor, and during his reign, his wife Noor Jahan played a very active role in the administration. Jahangir was then followed by Shah Jahan, 1628 CE to 1658 CE as the emperor. And then the emperor after Shah Jahan is Aurangzeb, which you will be studying a lot about Aurangzeb in towards your latter part of your chapters from 1658 to 1707, and he reigned for a very long time. After Aurangzeb's death, the Mughal Empire actually became very weak, and towards the end, by the time the British came to India, so that's how the Mughal Empire got disintegrated. Among all of this, Akbar was the most powerful king in the Mughal dynasty. Now you see movie, there's a movie also, Akbar Jodha. It's on the same king, Akbar the Great. So when he tried to bring India under his central authority, okay, he wants to get the entire country under him, he had to face a lot of opposition, and there were many other great leaders in our country. You have Maharana Pratap, Chand Bibi, Rani Durgavati. They struggled a lot against him, and I would say these struggles are also very noteworthy. You should know who these kings and warriors were. Maharana Pratap was born in a Hindu Rajput family, and he was born to Uday Singh. Now, just to give you little information, Uday Singh II was the Maharana of Mewar and the founder of Udaipur in the present day Rajasthan. So you see how the history goes back so far. So I was saying Maharana Pratap was born in a Hindu Rajput family, and he was well known for this battle called the Battle of Haldi Ghati. So what had happened was the Mughal, that is Emperor Akbar, was intent on securing a stable route to Gujarat, and he wanted to go through Mewar. But Pratap Singh was crowned king Rana in 1572, and Akbar sent a number of envoys entreating the Rana to become a vassal like many other Rajput leaders in the region. But Maharana Pratap Singh refused to personally submit to Akbar, and then it was war after that. Yeah, so this is about Maharana Pratap. So after the death of Uday Singh, Maharana Pratap ascended the throne of Mewar. He continued the struggle of Mewad's existence till the very end. He struggled with Akbar to maintain his independence, and he has become an immortal personality in history due to his qualities of valor. Valor means courage. Valor, courage, respect, sacrifice, and many other qualities. Students, now we will be looking at Chand Bibi. Chand Bibi was an Indian Muslim regent and warrior. Regent means a person who is appointed to take care of the kingdom either in the absence of a king, or maybe if the king is a minor, or if the king or the ruler is incapacitated. When I say incapacitated, it means that it is being deprived of strength and power. So I was saying that yes, Chand Bibi was an Indian Muslim regent and warrior. She acted as a regent of Bijapur and also of Ahmednagar. Well, in current times, Ahmednagar is in Maharashtra, in our state. Now, Chand Bibi is best known for her defending Ahmednagar against the Mughal forces of Emperor Akbar in the year 1595. A little bit of background: Chand Bibi was the daughter of Hussain Nizam Shah first of Ahmednagar and the sister of Burhan Nizam Shah too. Now, students, when I give this information with these names, like she's the daughter of this king and she's a sister of so and so person, it means that these people or these personalities have some standing in the society. Otherwise, their names wouldn't have been mentioned in the records. So, the Sultan of Ahmednagar, that is Nizam Shah. She knew many languages including Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Marathi, Kannada. She played sitar and painting flowers for a hobby. So students, don't just keep thinking like if there is a king or a queen or a ruler, they are only fighting all the time. They also have different hobbies. They like developing their skills. They know many languages, and that's the reason why they are at a post, because you have so much of skills and capabilities, right? So that's why I'm saying, students, don't just limit yourself only to education. Keep exploring, keep questioning, see if you can learn new skills as possible. That way you will become a capable person. So again, coming back to Chand Bibi, the Mughals attacked Ahmednagar, the capital of Nizam Shah's kingdom, in 1595 CE. The Mughal army put the fort of Ahmednagar under siege. When I say under siege, is under attack. Chand Bibi, the capable daughter of Hussain Nizam Shah of Ahmednagar, bravely defended the fort. At this time, there was an internal strife. When I say strife, there is like a disagreement, fight. Okay, now it is not external, it is internal, it is within. So it's an internal strife among the factions of the Sardars in Nizam Shahi's kingdom. This resulted in the murder of Chand Bibi. She is murdered over here. Later, the Mughals captured the fort of Ahmednagar, but the Mughals could not bring the entire kingdom of Nizam Shahi under their control. Students, I'm going to be talking about the next person, Rani Durgavati. Let me tell you that if a woman's name features in the textbook, I must say that these are very remarkable women, because India is a country where the society is any which way patriarchal. It is male dominated country, The importance is given to the male, to the men. But in such a situation, if a woman is information is given, which means that they have really worked so hard, or they are so capable that their name is equivalent with the other male rulers. So Rani Durgavati is one of them. She was the ruling queen of Gondwana, and Rani Durgavati's achievement further enhanced the glory of her ancestral tradition of courage and patronage. She was married to Dalpat Shah, who is the eldest son of King Sangram Shah of Gondwana Kingdom. Coming back to Gondwana, Gondwana can broadly be said to comprise of the eastern part of Vidarbha, then part of Madhya Pradesh to its north, the western part of today's Chhattisgarh, northern part of Andhra Pradesh, and the western part of Odisha. So, as I said earlier, Durgavati, born in the dynasty of Chandel Rajput, became the queen of Gondwana when she married Dalpat Shah. She was an excellent administrator. The struggle of Gondwana Queen Durgavati against the Mughal is important in the medieval history, because she never allowed the ruler to take control over her. She decided to die rather than surrendering. So after her husband's death, Durgavati laid down her life while fighting against Akbar, but yes, she did not surrender. Just a little more information. In the year 1983, the government of Madhya Pradesh renamed the University of Jabalpur as Rani Durgavati Vishwa Vidyalaya in her memory. Government of India issued a postal stamp commemorating her death on 24 June 1988. The train between Jabalpur Junction and Jammu Tawi is in Jammu Kashmir. Jammu Tawi is known as Durgavati Express, is also named after this queen. Well, now we are going to be talking about Aurangzeb. Well, his name is Muhyiddin Muhammad, commonly known by the sobriquet. Sobriquet means nickname. Aurangzeb was the 6th Mughal emperor who ruled over almost the entire Indian subcontinent for a period of 49 years. This is like a very long time, almost close to half a century. Aurangzeb compiled the Fatwa-e-Alamgiri and was among the few monarchs to have fully established Sharia law and Islamic economics throughout the Indian subcontinent. He was an accomplished military leader whose rule has been the subject of praise, though he has been described as the most controversial ruler of Indian history. Aurangzeb again became the emperor in 1658. At this time, the Mughal Empire extended from Kashmir in the north up to Ahmednagar in the south, and from Kabul in the west to Bengal in the east. To this, Aurangzeb added Assam in the east and the regions of Adil Shahi of Bijapur in the south and Qutub Shahi of Golconda after he ended these kingdoms. Now, this is an interesting topic, conflict with the Ahoms. Ahom-Mughal conflicts refer to the period between the first Mughal attack on the Ahom kingdom in 1615. I have given a map there, you can see it is the northeast side of India, and a final battle of Itta Kulhi in 1682. The intervening period saw the fluctuating fortune powers of both the kingdoms and the end of the rule of Koch Hajo. It ended with the Ahom influence extended to the Manas river, which remained the western boundary of the kingdom till the advent of the British in 1826. When I say advent, the arrival of the British in 1826. In the 13th century, the people of Shan community settled down in the valley of river Brahmaputra, that is again in the northeast. They established the kingdom there. They were locally known as Ahom people. While Aurangzeb ruled, the Ahoms had a prolonged struggle with the Mughals. The Mughals attacked the Ahoms region. The Ahoms united under the leadership of Gada Harisna, and Commander Lachit Borpunkan gave an intense battle against the Mughals. The Ahom used the guerrilla technique. You will come across guerrilla technique also during the Shivaji Maharaj time in the conflict against the Mughals. It became impossible for Mughals to create a strong base in Assam. Well, students, we come to the end of this chapter. Thank you very much for paying attention. For homework, what I would like to say is on Google, you can go to Airpano, 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 and search for Taj Mahal. And you will actually get to see Taj Mahal from a 360-degree view. You can get the aerial view, the front view, the side view, and you can actually get to see how Mughal architecture has influenced our country. And of course, India coming as one of the seven wonders of the world, it's primarily because of the Mughal rule, because of the architecture.